Therefore it says, wake up, sleeper, get up from the dead, Christ will shine on you. So be careful to live your life wisely, not foolishly. Take advantage of every opportunity because these are evil times. Because of this, don't be ignorant, but understand the Lord's will. Saints of God, our eyes have seen the glory and the coming of the Lord. He's trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the faithful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. I see him in the watchfires of 100 circling camps. They have builded him an altar in the evening dew and damps. I can read his righteous sentence by the dim and flaring lamps. His day is marching on.
Hello, welcome to Conversation with Faith Leaders. This is Dr. Brandon A.A.J. Davis, founder of Content Writing Service and the host of Conversation with Faith Leaders. And I have the distinct pleasure today of interviewing the candidate for the Pennsylvania 17th, Mr. Christopher DeLuzio. And I have a person who I'm excited to have this conversation with. He served as a military, he served in the Iraq and Afghan war. He is a veteran of those wars. He is a college professor. He is a community service person who has worked actively within his community. He's well married. He's well educated, and he has positioned himself, and he is offering himself as a candidate for the U.S. Congress representing Pennsylvania 17. And so I'm glad to have with me Mr. Chris DeLuzio. Please welcome Mr. DeLuzio. Hello, sir. How are you?
Pastor, thank you so much for having me on. It's a delight to be here. If I can make one small correction, I served only in Iraq, not in Afghanistan.
Thank you for that. And I sincerely apologize for the misspoke.
No problem.
I want to, first of all, thank you for being with me today. This is something that's additionally different. Most of the persons that I get to interview on my show represent the faith community as pastors, as seminary professors, as social change agents. This conversation is uniquely different in that I'm speaking with someone who's aspiring for the U.S. Congress, who's offering himself as an agent of the community, someone who wants to do something for the people in southwestern Pennsylvania. And so if you will, just take a moment to introduce yourself in your own words and your platform for serving in Congress.
Well, thank you for a chance to do exactly that. I'm a guy born and raised here, right here in Western Pennsylvania in this district. I went off to the Naval Academy after the 9/11 attacks of my senior year of high school. I served as an officer at sea. I served on the ground in Iraq, and been fighting to protect voting rights in our elections as an attorney, and was a proud member of our organizing committee at Pitt alongside the steelworkers, and am trying to serve this region well in the Congress, bringing my love of country, what shaped me into this life and my life of public service, to put our region and our folks around here first, to fight for our common good and make sure people have the economic security they deserve and they've earned, that our civil rights, our freedom are protected, that our democracy is healthy. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation. I very much appreciate the chance to be here.
Absolutely. Now, how long have you been in the public sphere? I know that you've been a college professor, and I do consider that to be in the public space, because you're shaping the minds of people, young people, adults. Everybody's going back to school these days. But how long have you been in this public sphere of working in the community?
Look, I first raised my right hand and took the oath of office to serve this country when I was 17. I first went to the Naval Academy. And so public service has shaped my life in uniform, my work as a lawyer, working for a judge, working for voting rights and to protect our elections, working at the Cyber Institute at Pitt, doing some teaching at the law school, fighting for a union. I think it's all of the things that I have tried to do in my life, and to include running here for Congress, asking folks for their votes, has been shaped by exactly that, a commitment to public service and trying to put others in our community in this country first.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this question. In light of the current political landscape, what are your plans for being a different and caring leader for Pennsylvania 17?
Look, I think you have to, if you're going to serve folks well, whatever your politics, you've got to bring people together around shared values. No matter who you are, how you worship, who you love. I think people want and expect that they can put food on the table, that they're secure and feel safe in their communities, that their basic civil rights, their voting rights, their rights on the job are protected, their freedoms, that their kids can have a future to look forward to, and that we live in a democracy that's healthy. Our government is responsive to people, and we have leaders committed to all of us. That's what's first for me. And I come to this again from a place of service, a place of really trying to fight for a better future for all of us, believing deeply in the idea of this country and its aspirational nature, that we should always be striving for better and more, and to really build a government and a society that protects our freedom, protects our liberty, and serves us all well.
Yes, sir. So let me ask you this question. What are your faith influences and motivations for wanting to serve in Congress? And if you can point out those, if you can identify what is your faith affiliation.
Yeah. So Catholic, and I grew up Catholic, and I'll say, much of my worldview around service, are things I learned as a young man, right? Understanding what the church was teaching. And I trace not just my love of country, but my desire and my commitment to try to serve others to so much of what I learned, right? The idea that what's in your heart matters, but what you do matters too. Absolutely. Your good deeds very much matter. And that's always been something pretty central to me. And, look, I think people's faith and the religious traditions can be a very personal, very private matter at times. And I think whatever your tradition might be, we all do better looking to serve our neighbors, looking to serve those around us. And it's certainly something that's always been very central to me.
So I want to ask you this question as a part two to that question. Has it been difficult trying to identify? What I've noticed is that since the pandemic, a lot of people has been given space and time to question things, to look at things a little bit different, because we were sheltered because of the pandemic. Have you found it difficult to interact both, socially and intellectually with millennials, and trying to help them to understand how we do politics, and that not everyone who is engaged in the political arena is a bad person?
Look, there's distrust of people in government and politics. I understand. I think even if you look at the race I'm in right now, we're in a competitive district, a competitive race. That's rare. A lot of this country we don't have competitive elections. And I think it breeds some distrust. I think the way we fund elections with all of this big corporate money flying around breeds distrust. When you have politicians on the far right trying to overthrow elections and sowing disunion in this country, it breeds distrust. So I think there is skepticism out there. Look, I'm 38. I'm a millennial myself. When I talk to friends around my age and folks younger, voters younger, I think we've got a lot of work to do to get people committed and engaged in our political process, whatever your politics might be. And I think that's part of this job, should I be lucky enough to be a member of Congress, it's not just winning elections, it's doing right by others and giving people a reason to want to fight for and believe in their government.
Absolutely. So this kind of helps segue into what I want to ask you now. How do you plan to reimagine the way leaders do politics? And what are your plans for re-engaging voters still combating with COVID-19? And I say that because even as a pastor, I've noticed that some people will use COVID-19 as an excuse to not really do what they don't want to do. Hey, I can't do that because of COVID-19, or I can't participate in that because of COVID-19. But in a more realistic way, COVID-19 kind of forced us into a new technological reality. And so how do you plan to reimagine leaders to people who do politics, and how do you plan to reengage voters with this pandemic?
Well, look, you'll never be able to replace the value of a door knock, of being there on someone's porch or meeting them, where they're praying, where they're celebrating, where they're hanging out in a park. That's an invaluable thing. But I think if nothing else, we've learned in the last 2 years that we do have these digital tools like we're doing today, like whether you're on Zoom or other kinds of virtual events where you've got options to get involved, not just in politics or government, but lots of ways to meet with others. And we should use those tools. My campaign certainly has phone calls and text banking and Zoom events and things like that to get people engaged if being somewhere in person doesn't work out for them, whether it's they're worried about health or childcare stuff, or you're someone who's at home and not able to get around easily. So I think these tools can help us expand the ways for people to get involved in whatever it is they're doing and whatever it is you're talking about. And I certainly don't intend to walk away from the technologies we have in these tools. Should I be a member of Congress, and when I'm a member of Congress, looking for ways to engage people across this district.
One of the things that I come to appreciate is how people became excited about these virtual town halls. So should you be elected to Congress, would you be doing virtual town halls in Pennsylvania 17 so that people can stay active, even though they may have a real fear of being in the public sphere?
I think for any time you're doing something open to the public as a member of Congress, you're wise to have an option for folks to be on virtually. Even if none of the concerns we've talked about aren't there, it may just be a matter of convenience or schedule. And so that's an easy one for me, and what my office will do here in the future is you got to give folks ways to be involved, to listen, to be able to share their voice without having to necessarily show up to a place and a time that may not work for their life, for their family, or their job.
Gotcha. So let me kind of add to that. So how important is it to embrace this kind of technology for education in areas like Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, where there is a deficiency in the educational infrastructure because of the median income here is $31,000 and change. The population is 9,238, sort of kind of, and 81 to 91% of the students are of a minority race, and they come from economically challenged homes.
Yeah, I mean, look, if technology can help us break down those barriers and break down those disparities, we have to use it. And I think, so much of how we fund our schools, it's the local property taxes, the state does some of that, but the federal government, people often forget, had a big hand in getting kids back to school in the pandemic, of getting resources to schools to make them safer, to give kids the tools they need to learn. And I think there's strong and smart infrastructure investment we got to do around things as basic as broadband, making sure kids have access to the internet so they can access those tools. If there are ways to supplement learning at school with things we're doing online, those are resource intensive things. And, it breaks your heart to hear about kids having to congregate around a McDonald's to get Wi-Fi. That's something that, in 2022 America, whether you're in Aliquippa or anywhere else, we got to be fighting for more and better broadband access. And frankly, that's part of, I think, fighting for educational justice for every kid around this region.
Absolutely. So I want to slide to question number 4. What does an inclusive and encompassing government leader look like to you, and how much does race factor into your leadership plans for Pennsylvania 17?
Look, I think I've been a government leader who strived for exactly that. When I was an officer, I led sailors and soldiers from every walk of life, from every skin color, every faith, all parts of the country, you name it. I mean, it was truly a beautiful thing to see Americans and all over the world serving together with a common purpose, where you had to not only learn about people with very different backgrounds or coming from a very different perspective, but work together and make friendships and tear down those barriers that might exist at first look. So that's something, it's not new to me. It's something I very much sought to do and strive to do as an officer, and certainly part of how I'll try to lead here as a member of Congress. And it starts with listening, right? Of hearing people where they are, meeting them where they are, talking to folks, whether it's at churches, whether it's at community events, holding listening sessions, giving people ways and methods to talk to you. And whether white, black, brown, Catholic, Jewish, Protestant, you name it, people have and are very committed to this region and want to share their views and ought to be heard, and that ought to shape how their member of Congress confronts not just politics and elections, but serving. And it's certainly part of how I understand this job.
So here's a question that I did not get a chance to submit to you. Everyone is watching the January 6th trials. Everybody's wondering what's going to happen to former President Trump, the people who were engaged in those treasonous behaviors on the U.S. Capitol. Everybody is wondering, what's really happening with our government. It seems like more than ever, if you're not Republican, you don't care about America. If you're Democrat, you don't care about America. It's so much political jargon and empty rhetoric taking place. How do we move through that murky water and understand the person we're voting for in the booth?
Look, I love this country. I think most folks around here love this country and are willing to fight for it. And I mean in the sense of fight with their votes, fight with their voices, rally their neighbors to make sure this democracy of ours is strong. And I don't think, I think most people, Democrat, Independent, Republican, want our government and our democracy to be healthy. And I think they see the fringe, dangerous attacks on the far right. They see something like January 6th. They're disgusted by it. And they're, I think, committed to making sure that this system of government of ours will succeed. And that, unfortunately, requires us to win some elections against those who would tear it down. So in some ways, it is a partisan problem. And I wish we were just having debates about the usual things that Democrats, Republicans, and earlier, simpler times used to debate. But I unfortunately don't think that's where we are. We have people who tried to overthrow our election running for office. We have people on the far right who were attending the January 6th insurrection, like Doug Mastriano, campaigning with my opponent, who's taken support from people in Washington who tried to throw out our election. So our voting rights here are under attack. Our democracy here is under attack, and we have to be willing to defend it. And again, I think it's an American problem, and I think people from all political walks of life around here, most folks, are committed to defending exactly that. And I think it's a message of unity that this is a thing worth fighting for around here.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I'm going to take a quick break to recognize one of our sponsors, and we'll be right back. This is a very enjoyable conversation. I can't thank you enough for your presence. And we'll be right back with just one more question with candidate Chris DeLuzio for Pennsylvania 17 Congress.
Praise him with a violin.
Welcome. I'm Alphonse Allen, the senior pastor of Allen Temple AME Church.
And I'm personal injury attorney Blake Maislin, partnering together to bring you the Allen Temple broadcast.
Allen Temple, reaching the city one soul at a time. Every Sunday morning at 8 on the CW Cincinnati.
And now we're inviting you to join us.
Every Sunday morning at 8 on the CW Cincinnati.
And we're back with candidate Chris DeLuzio for U.S. Congress, Pennsylvania 17. And again, I want to thank him for his time with me. Mr. DeLuzio, I want to ask you this question. With the rising effects of racism and police brutality, what are your plans to confront it if elected to Congress?
And I think you have to have some moral leadership to confront racism and this rising white nationalism head on. These are forces that we've seen here in Western Pennsylvania and across the country. We have a person running for governor who has embraced some of the most extreme versions of this white nationalism that we have to, we can legislate all we want, but you need moral leadership, I think, to condemn this when we see it, every time we see it. And it's that soft power of moral leadership that I think really matters. And, look, there are things we have to do and should do, I think, as legislators too. I mean, we have to have funding for our schools to make sure that we've got people and counselors there to help our students, to guide them when they are in crisis, to keep them safe. We've got to have funding for our communities to stay safe, and that's public safety writ large. It's, yes, supporting and making sure our police departments have the training and resources they need to police effectively and fairly. It's also investing in public safety beyond that, right? To make sure we have mental health support for folks, to fight for economic justice for people, to have paths to economic security. And we need, frankly, to tackle violence. You got to be able to tackle the scourge of gun violence, especially. I think there are too many folks who feel like nothing can be done about seeing children gunned down in schools or people gunned down in their houses of worship. I'm someone who's carried a gun in a dangerous place when I was in uniform, and I know as well as most that we need some common sense reforms to make sure people have past background checks before they can buy a gun and can't buy weapons of war to take them to churches and schools to kill our friends and neighbors. So that it's all of those things and so much more. And we have to do make sure we're doing things to intervene to protect public health, to keep people safe. And not one part of this will solve these problems, and no one person or member of Congress can. It takes our community standing together, fighting together for justice. And I know Western Pennsylvania knows how to do that.
You look at other countries and you see the statistical information that they share about, police shootings, school shootings. You see how they handle, public health care, how they handle education. What is it that's so difficult for Americans, and particularly those who serve in Congress, to see what other countries are doing and see how we best can replicate some of those ways? I mean, you could pretty much get all the medicine you need in Canada for $10. I mean, not exactly $10, but medication and healthcare is affordable in London, in England. It's affordable in Canada. Education is affordable in Canada. I had a college professor who tried to convince me to attend grad school and seminary in another country because education was free there. What is it so difficult? I think England put out a report some time ago that I read where they haven't had a school shooting in over 20 years. What is it what's so difficult about us being able to replicate some of the things that other countries have successfully done?
I'll be honest, Pastor, and I don't love to make everything a partisan fight, but this one is. I think we have politicians in the Republican Party who don't have the courage to do what's necessary and what's right. We had them in the Congress, every single one of them, vote against letting Medicare negotiate drug prices, to put a cap on insulin prices for seniors. Every single one voted against it. They're beholden to a gun lobby who blocks common sense reform that huge majorities of Americans support. Things like background checks for every purchase, taking weapons of war off the streets. So it's a crisis of political courage, frankly, on the other side. And I think we've got to beat them in elections to have leaders who are willing to do what most people in this country, in this region, expect us to do, to keep us safe, to fight for a society that's one that we all have a path to freedom and economic dignity that we all earn and deserve, I think, as Americans around here. That's what I'm committed to do. That's what I hope to do if I'm in Congress.
One of the things that I want to end with is first to ask you, how does, as a pastor in Aliquippa, Pennsylvania, Aliquippa has a distressed community label since 1987. If elected to Congress, what can you do, if there is anything you can do, or what are your plans for helping communities like Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. And I haven't been here long. November will be 1 year that I've served this congregation, and I'm already on my second appointment, and that's how the Methodist Church works. I'm already on my second appointment to this church. What can be done about that label, that stigmatic label, that causes people to feel like there's nothing to look forward to, because the state and the federal government seem to have given up on us because the infrastructure is no longer here like it used to be. Aliquippa used to boast 29,000 people. It's now 9,000 plus. So what can you do for, what are your plans for places like Aliquippa, Pennsylvania?
Well, let me start with a pretty clear statement of I have not forgotten about places like Aliquippa. I never will. And I think there's a key part of this of jobs and economic opportunity as being a real driver. When JNL was humming, it wasn't just Aliquippa that was thriving. It was so many communities around it whose main streets were vibrant. When folks had strong union jobs, what that meant for not just economic prosperity, but for justice for people around this region. And so, for me as a member of Congress, what I can do is fight to make sure that we're growing our manufacturing in places like Aliquippa, where they suffered so much under decades of globalization that shipped our manufacturing overseas, shipped it down the right to work states in the South and across the border to Mexico and China and Lord knows where else. So I think we have to confront that big problem on top of so many others. But it's, without those job bases, without those strong manufacturing, without those strong union jobs to fight for dignity for workers on the job, I think we're talking about Band-Aids and not curing real problems that plague places like Aliquippa and Western Pennsylvania across the board. So that's what I'm committed to fighting for. I think we need that. I think we're primed to see good economic growth around here, especially as we bring back more of our supply chains in this country coming out of the pandemic. And I'll be fighting to do exactly that.
Listen, I want to thank Mr. Christopher DeLuzio, candidate for U.S. Congress, Pennsylvania 17, for taking time out of his busy schedule, giving him a chance to come inside the warmth for a few minutes before he goes back outside canvassing in the community. I want to thank you for being with me today. And I want to just give you a moment to share whatever it is you want to share as you sign off.
Well, Pastor, thank you so much. This was a really fun, warm conversation for me. I've always had so much, felt so much love in Aliquippa from friends across the board, and it's always a treat. Look, I hope folks will vote. I hope they will vote for me. I hope you got a sense of who I am. I'm someone who loves this country, who loves this place we call home. It shaped me and who I am. And I'll be fighting for our common good in this campaign, in the Congress, fighting for our dignity, our prosperity, our freedom every single day. And so I'd be proud to serve us. I hope folks will give me a chance to do exactly that. So thank you so much, Pastor.
Thank you, Mr. DeLuzio. Praying for your success. And I look forward to you being in Aliquippa. If your schedule still allows it, I look forward to welcome you at Ebenezer African Methodist Episcopal Church in Aliquippa on November 6th. Yeah, November 6th for our morning worship service. So we're looking forward to having you here and to give you a chance to introduce yourself to our congregation. And we can't wait to have you here. So once again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Thank you. Listen, this has been a very different but very welcomed conversation. As a pastor and as a community leader, I feel that it is our responsibility to make sure that our people are well informed on who's trying to serve us in the United States Congress, in the United States Senate, and even in the local municipality elections. So I want to thank Mr. Christopher DeLuzio for taking time out of his schedule to be with me today on Conversation with Faith Leaders. As he articulated, he is a man of faith. He is a person who is guided by his faith, and it inspires him to be a change agent in the community. As a signing off, I would like to share with you this repeated thought that I have often shared before. It is the ministry of the church to offer healing and wholeness, to build inclusive communities that reflect justice and love, and to redirect this country's social consciousness. This is Conversation with Faith Leaders. I'm Dr. Brandon A.J. Davis. founder of Content Writing Service and Conversation with Faith Leaders. And I look forward to seeing you next time in this place, Conversations with Faith Leaders. Thanks for watching.